told them I couldn't remember. The doctors, my family, and friends. I told them all that I couldn't remember a thing from that day. It was all a blank. It's better if they believe that. Better for them and, well, easier for me. So I keep telling them that I don't remember anything. But I remember everything. That's my burden to bear, and I accept it. But that's become too heavy to bear alone now, so I'm going to share it with all of you. Hopefully this will ease my mind enough that I can at least start sleeping again without the medication they keep pumping into me. 'Cause I hate this place. The doctors say I'm not well enough to go home yet, though. Need to have what they call a breakthrough. I saw my file, and it says that I'm resistant to conventional treatment. And then it seems like I don't want to get better. Well, what do they know? Nothing. At least not about what happened to me. If only I could show them. Telling is no good here. They would just say it's a delusion sparked by my recent break with reality. See, I'm even starting to sound like the doctors here. Yeah, I've been here too long. Well, here is my attempt at forcing a breakthrough. This is my story. It was 3 years ago. There were 4 of us going to spend the night in the woods. My parents own a few acres butted up against the national forest land in Tennessee. It's a quiet place, a good place to raise kids. My parents bought the place when they first got married and made an isolated niche in the woods their home. My brother and I came along about 2 years apart, and we all lived happy and quiet lives by farming and raising hay for the nearby cattle owners and the hillside market. That store is family owned. My great-grandfather founded the store and tailored the stock especially for the people who lived in the area. And some of my best memories from childhood are making butter and packaging it for the store, baking the fresh breads 4 days a week, and putting together the weekly menus for the little kitchen my father had added to his store. We were always busy, but we all loved the work, so there were rarely any complaints. Even though summers were busy, me, my dad, and my brother always found a way to take at least 2 short camping trips into the mountains surrounding the house. Mom didn't go with us very often. She preferred having the house to herself a couple times each summer. And I guess all of us guys stomping around and being messy and loud, it made her kind of happy to not be around for a while. But anyway, these camping trips were a tradition until me and my brother Toby grew up and moved away for college. Toby went to college in Georgia, and I went to a community college only a few hours away, just far enough that it was prudent for me to stay in the dorms there. As with all teens, I was eager to get my own life started and do things my way. Now, Toby and I kept in close contact via the internet, phone calls for the first year of college. He was already in his sophomore year, and I looked up to him. I envied him and all of his savvy and worldly knowledge and all his cool friends. He was always going to parties and having fun. I wanted to kind of emulate that. And even though I wasn't as outgoing as Toby, I pushed myself and eventually I began to make friends. It wasn't easy to find people who had the same interests as me, but I did it. And by the end of my freshman year, I had 3 close friends, Jack, Robert, and Sean. They had all 3 come from the same general area as I had, and they had all grown up in the same county on farms. I had a real connection with them. The ever-present need to impress and outdo each other was the thing that spurred us on to do things that were, how should I say, dangerous, risky. Yeah, that sums it up. We were always planning and doing things that were dangerous and risky. We loved the adrenaline rushes. We all wanted exciting stories to tell our families when we were older, too. During my second year of college, I changed. I became convinced that I could do anything. I was invincible. I became cocky, conceited, My grades didn't suffer. I remained an A/B student, but I didn't have a career in mind, so I was basically floating aimlessly, taking whatever classes caught my attention. Naturally, I could keep my grades up as long as I liked the classes I was taking, but I didn't care. I was having fun. All four of us took turns planning our next big adventure. Jack, being the unspoken leader of our little group, always suggested the riskiest activity possible. Sometimes, we would shoot it down immediately, and we would spend hours trying to come up with something we could all agree to do. I always wanted to be more like Jack. I think we all did, but I just wasn't that brave. The last adventure Jack suggested we all agreed to was bungee jumping off of a bridge. In the middle of this little adventure, I was sure I was going to die. My cord would snap and I would plummet all the way to the river below. Obviously, I didn't, and I went back to school totally stoked that I had another cool story to tell people. 2 weeks later, during our next bit of free time, it was my turn to plan an adventure. How exactly do you follow bungee jumping off of a bridge in the mountains? The only thing I could think to top that was maybe skydiving. That was just a great big nope from Robert and Sean. Jack was all fired up for it though. I was happy that the others shot down the idea because I didn't want to jump out of a plane. Then, I brought the idea of a haunted hollow camping trip. After all, the land was right behind my parents' place. I knew the mountains well, and I would be in my comfort zone knowing we were safe. At least safer than if we were jumping out of a plane or off of a bridge. I would feed them the same spiel my father told me and Toby about the haunted hollow, and we would all get to enjoy a camping trip, which I knew would be peaceful and safe. To be honest, I was ready for something peaceful after Jack had us jumping off the bridge. Robert and Sean bugged me until the day we were supposed to leave for the trip. They wanted to know the story behind the hollow. Who had told me about it? Had I ever seen the ghosts? Had anyone in my family seen the ghosts? And the questions went on and on until I felt like I was stuck with a couple of nosy, overexcited kindergarten kids. We all packed our overnight bags for camping and crammed everything into Robert's Jeep Cherokee. It took about 4 hours to get to the general area, so we decided to stop at a restaurant and get food before going into the woods. Jill's Grill has the best milkshakes in Tennessee. We all got large ones for the road. Robert pulled over and told me to drive up the mountain road past my parents' house. I was the only one who was familiar with the winding, rugged road, and I didn't mind a bit. It was time for me to start in with a story about the haunted hollow. I wanted to scare them, or at least unsettle them as much as possible before we started hiking. That way, every normal noise, every rustle of leaves, would leave them wondering if it was the ghosts or not. The story I had always heard from my family, especially my father, was that back in the 1780s, when our family had owned most of the county, there had been a house and barn in that hollow. My ancestors had 12 children that lived, and each of them eventually built on their parents' property, till a small mountain community sprang up and thrived. It's hard to imagine now because, well, there's nothing left unless you know where to look for the foundation stones of their buildings. Nature has almost completely taken it all back. My father pointed out the corner posts of the old barn more than once, so I knew its location well. It was weathered and worn, and looked like an old dying tree sticking out of the ground to the untrained eye. Grandmother and Grandfather White lived in the first house built in that hollow. They were happy, hard-working people. Grandfather White was the first in his family to be born in the U.S. He was proud of that, always looking for a way to make the world look proudly on his German-turned American family. He loved Grandmother White more than anything in the world, and when they had children, he loved those babies just as fiercely as he loved their mother. When our eldest son turned 15, Grandfather White helped him start building his own house a little ways down the mountain. At 17, the son got married, and they moved into the fine big house and started a family of their own. The son then built a barn and began his own farm and keeping his own livestock. It was tranquil for years. Then, as the story goes, a vagabond found the hollow and asked the son if he might use the barn's loft to take shelter for a few weeks. Against his wife's wishes, he let the old vagabond stay. He felt sorry for the man who had nowhere to go and no family to take him in. Besides, what harm could an old man be? The vagabond stayed in the barn loft for over a month. Grandmother cooked food for the old man and sneaked it to him in the evenings when grandfather was tending to the horses. Grandfather loved her, but he was very jealous. She didn't want to cause a scene, but she also felt sorry for the old man too. A few days into the second month of his stay, the vagabond did the unthinkable. While his kind host was out working in the woods, the old man went into the house. The woman of the house was alone and pregnant with her second child. Her husband would come home late that night to find her dead in front of the cold fireplace and their baby screaming in his crib upstairs. That is how ghost number 1 came into the story. But that's not the bad one. Grandfather, seeing what his son was going through, hunted down that vagabond and murdered him with his bare hands. Grandfather brought the man back to the hollow and threw his body into the pig pen, letting the swine take care of the evidence. That's how ghost number 2, the one that was terrible, came into the story. The vagabond was supposedly the one who murdered unwary campers and hikers. There is a whole collection of news stories about murdered campers and hikers in the general area that are used as proof of the ghost's existence. I might have added a few fake stories in there just to add to the effect when I saw it was beginning to bother Robert and Sean. Now Jack, well, I wasn't too sure about. He was hard to read, but I thought he had gone abnormally quiet, so I kept piling it on. Late that night, when the fire was dying down and we were getting ready to crawl into our sleeping bags, I heard movement just inside the tree line that didn't sound natural. I grabbed the flashlight, but didn't see anything. Robert and Sean started stoking the fire. Jack took a flashlight and went to investigate. Tried to keep up with us, but he was set on finding the critter and making us all feel like chicken shits when it turned out to be nothing more than a raccoon or another little critter. I stood as far from the fire as I dared, but Jack disappeared into the woods. The darkness swallowed him in his beam of light. Robert and Sean joined me at the edge of the campsite with their lights. 15 minutes passed, and I was getting really scared. Just as we started into the woods where Jack had gone, I heard his scream echoing from over the next ridge. Robert and Sean started pulling on their boots, and in a panic, they took off down the trail at a good clip, leaving me with my indecision. Jack's screams moved closer. He was running toward the campsite, and I pulled on my boots and pulled my rifle from its case. Jack wouldn't scream that way unless it was a big wild animal, and I didn't even believe a ghost would make him scream that way. And I was right. Jack came bolting out of the woods, his shirt covered in blood, and one of his arms missing from the elbow down. Blood gushed from the stump. His eyes were wild and his face pale as milk. He was in shock. I grabbed for him as he ran past me. His feet dangled in a sleeping bag, and he hit the ground thrashing hysterically. I turned my attention to the thing crashing through the woods where Jack had come from, fully expecting to see a brown bear from the sound of it. It stopped just inside the line of trees in the darkness. Sweat ran down my face, and it was hard to breathe, but I kept my attention on the spot where it had stopped. Jack screamed and flailed on the ground behind me, and the animal growled, low and loud, and I wanted to run out of there so bad, but I couldn't leave Jack there. There was no way he could run the way he was losing blood. The thing stalked down a bit further behind a bunch of laurel bushes, and I watched as the leaves jangled back and forth. Then, a long, thin leg hooked through the leaves. It looked like a goat's hindquarter, but it was much too long. My breath stopped in my lungs. The second leg came into view, and my brain tried to decipher what my eyes were seeing. The back legs of an extremely tall goat. His junk and his belly were in plain view because he was standing straight up. The torso looked human, as did the arms, but the neck and head were that of a goat. It was like a human had interrupted the formation of a goat and got stuck in the middle of it. The creature had to be over 6 feet tall, and it was muscular. And I fired off 2 rounds and saw them hit the goat man. Instead of falling, he gave a guttural, unearthly scream and ran straight for me. I dropped the gun and backed up, tripping over Jack. I grabbed Jack's feet and dragged him toward the trail, knowing I would never outrun the creature, but I had to try. And then all of a sudden, Jack's scream suddenly stopped. The goat man grabbed his head and twisted it violently enough that it twisted Jack's entire body, throwing me to the side and breaking Jack's neck. I crawled several feet in my haste before I could get my feet under me again. The goat man used his curled horns and butted me in the center of my back. Sprawled face down, I skidded on the trail and the goat man descended upon me. Now I would like to say here that I fought the good fight and came out on top, but it would be a lie. I ended up curling into a fetal position and playing dead as he kicked, butted and bit me. The ruse seemed to work though, because after a few seconds of mauling me without reprisal, he seemed to give up. I stood when I thought he was gone and ran for the trail, hoping Robert had taken his keys and was setting the Jeep waiting for me and Jack to show up. The Jeep's engine was within earshot when the goat man came out of the darkness and grabbed me by the arm. He dragged me up to his face, those red eyes burning into my soul as he screamed and threw me against a tree. This time, I did fight, although it wasn't a good fight, and I certainly did not win. My missing arms and foot are my trophies from that confrontation. I only survived because Robert and Sean were still in the Jeep at sunrise. They had fallen asleep there waiting on me and Jack. When they woke, they thought the coast must have been all clear and started back to the campsite, embarrassed that they had been so scared. And that's when they found me. I've pleaded amnesia ever since. I mean, who's gonna believe there's a goat man living in a mountain, killing people? July 15th, 1918. It's a pretty hot day and Julie looks absolutely gorgeous in her high-waisted shorts and buttoned-up flannel shirt. Her lovely red curls have been tied up in a lazy bun behind her head, but a few wild strands managed to sneak out and are now framing her beautiful face. Sun's high, and the cicadas are singing in the sound of Julie's heavy breath a few steps behind me, as me snickering under my breath. I told you those things were poison, but nobody listens to me. That's why I stopped. I tell her with a bright smile as I reach the high grounds and extend my arm to help her. Julie's pretty fond of those cigarettes, but I always found myself short of breath whenever I smoked, so I quit pretty fast. She makes a grimace at me, which is only intensified by how red her cheeks have become from the effort of the hike. Fortunately, this is a pretty easy hiking site, and I wonder how she would fare in Mountain Peak. Well, probably not well. As soon as Julie is up with me, she uncaps the lid on her bottle of water and downs about half of it in a single gulp. Then, she finds what looks like a comfortable rock and sits, requesting a short break from me without a word. She lights up her cigarette. I can't help but to roll my eyes. Everyone has a vice, and I'm glad mine isn't a cigarette. Nah, my weakness is a far more curious nature. You see, I'm intrigued by the strange and the occult, and I read many times a book that told me there was something hiding in these woods. The reason I brought Julie with me today is not that I wanted her to exercise, or because there was a lovely sight atop of the hiking trail, like I told her. And now, the reason is that I finally discovered something, and I wanted to share it with someone else. And who better than my partner in crimes and pranks than Julie to explore this with me? I wanted to go alone, but before I could even enter these grounds, something pulled on me and told me that I shouldn't go alone. It wasn't fright that prevented me from going. After all, let it be known, Dustin Fleming is not a coward. So, if it wasn't fright, what was it that stopped me from going on an adventure alone? Well, it was hard to tell. Maybe I felt like I needed to go with Julie because I knew she would be just as intrigued as me. Or even simpler, maybe I just wanted a witness, someone that would believe me because they saw it. And quite frankly, I'm pretty sure it's the latter because even I have a hard time believing what I found. I watch as Julie crushes the butt of her cigarette onto the rock and spit on it to make sure it's unlit. If there's anything I respect about her, it's that she always takes all the necessary precautions. In all situations. And it's not like she's a coward or anything. Julie has more guts than anyone I know by far, but she's also the most cautious girl I've ever seen. Spitting on her cigarettes is something she does every time she burns one in nature because she thinks she's going to set fire to the woods if she doesn't. It's actually a bit adorable. Julie asks if it was what I wanted to show her, and she points toward the horizon. There's a space between the trees which reveals a pretty okay sight. It's good. And I did tell her that I brought her to this trail because there was something she absolutely needed to see. And it wasn't wrong of her to expect it was that sight. My lips stretched in a grin, and I nod negatively. It wasn't what I wanted to show her. Gripping her wrist firmly, I asked her if she'd trust me. Her brows furrow a little, but she's quick to smile again and nod at me. Silently, I let my eyes trace a path from freckle to freckle on her cheekbone until I meet her gaze again. Her eyes scream curiosity and excitement, so I decided against making her wait any further. Leading her off the trail, I keep my hand around her wrist, my heart beating faster and faster in my chest. And I could feel every thump reverberate against my ribcage. After about 10 minutes off the trail, Julie starts to worry and asks me where we're going. And I joke and tell her not to worry, that I'm not going to kill her and dump her body in the woods. She laughs because she also has a dark sense of humor. And seconds later, I knock on a tree and show her a scratch I left there, so I remember my way in and out. See? I know where we're going. I don't really need these though, but I knew you'd be scared if I didn't. Julie snorts and puts on a brave front before giving me a solid punch on the shoulder. She hits harder than she thinks, but I don't really mind. I deserve a little after all. After a few more minutes in the deep of the forest, a strange carnival music starts to be heard around us, and Julie's eyes widened in disbelief. She asks me if it is what she thinks it is, and I cannot help my grin any longer. I told her that I couldn't believe it either the first time I found it, and that I needed her to be there to reassure myself that I wasn't going crazy. The closer we got to the fairgrounds, the louder the music. However, even as we finally reached it, it isn't as loud as it should be in a carnival. The sound is a bit distorted, probably from playing aimlessly for the past 50 years. Like an old music box that lost its synchronization. Song eerily plays, sometimes jumps and sometimes loops back a few seconds earlier. We enter the carnival through the usual metallic gates, which have now long been claimed by nature. Vines and high grass are curled and wrapped around the bars, and this time, I do not feel the pull asking me to not be alone. I enter the grounds and I feel like a child in a candy shop. And I don't know where to start. Should I go with Julie to the carousel of broken horses and unicorns? Should I visit the abandoned shooting games, or should I just go to the main event and get into the tent? It seems like Julie is the one to make that decision for me as she rushes towards the carousel. This one is covered in grass, and most of the horses have lost their heads, and those who haven't are deformed, blemished toys that are rotting in the sun and have lost all of their colors. One of the unicorn's rainbow horn now looks like a bunch of pastel candy stuck together. It's even bent out of shape, probably due to the sun hitting it up every summer since the place was abandoned. Julie asks me if I think it's the works, and I nod negatively. Without electricity or knowledge of how these things work, I can't possibly make it work. But still, Dustin Fleming is not a quitter. I make my way to what looks like a panel, and I start touching all the buttons. Obviously, it doesn't do anything. Until my eyes settle on what looks like a little box with a coin acceptor. I snort and put a penny in it. My penny slides back down below, and I raise my arm in defeat to tell Julie I can't do it. However, as soon as she tries to get off the horse, the music gets louder and the carousel starts moving. And I can't believe my eyes, and neither does Julie. Her hands instinctively wrap around the headless horse's neck, and she's giggling like a child. She does 3, 4, 5 turns before the mechanism stops, and when she gets off, she runs towards me excitedly. When she asks me how I did that, I show her a penny. I slide it in and pick it up from the bottom of the box, and then wait for the carousel to start again. But it doesn't. I try it again and it doesn't do anything. Disheartened, we make our way to the shooting stand, which is half broken and overrun by nature as well. Vines had taken a strong hold of the stand, and high grass had buried half the turrets. Still, we pick up the guns from the counter which are tied with a rope so thieves couldn't run off with them, and tried to shoot a few of the visible targets. To our surprise, Julie's gun actually shoots small bullets, and she hits a few targets. The stands illuminate for a few seconds, and a mechanical voice tells her that she has won. She has won. She has won. She has won, and repeats it until the voice is so distorted we can only hear the mechanical clicking of the recording. I jokingly tell her that this place was only waiting for her to be alive and she let me shut me. However, I start believing in it. Why wouldn't I? Something told me not to go alone, and everything seems to be brought back to life whenever she touches anything from the carnival. And after the carousel and the guns, I'm convinced that Julie needed to be here. And I don't yet know the reason, but one thing's for sure. She belongs here more than me. I started hearing strange noise coming from the main tent. It's a clicking and a clacking, repeatedly as if 100 pairs of toddlers' feet were stomping the ground. I'm intrigued, but Julie's already dragging me towards the next attraction, the strongman attraction. I pass the hand into my hair and look at the hammer, then the bar. And I wonder if this one will work since it doesn't seem to be electrical or anything. I pick up the hammer and, proud like a rooster, I make my way in front of the strongman attraction. I give Julie a look and flex my muscles, which aren't bulging that much, and I lift the hammer. When I finally slam it down on the bell-shaped merp, the ball rises up to 75 in the scale. And I cannot hide my grin. I'm pretty sure that's a good score. And unfortunately, Julie is quick to prove me wrong and she knocks a solid 125 effortlessly. My mouth is left agape and I feel the edge of my cheekbones tingling with shame as a cynical evil laughter rises from the machine. Both Julie and I stare at each other in dismay, and then we look back at the strongman attraction to try and figure out where this was coming from. And a shiver runs down my spine as I hear the footsteps again, and I ask Julie if she's heard that. And I'm starting to be a bit uncomfortable, but I don't know why. She asks about the laughter and I correct her, asking her about the footsteps. But she didn't hear that. I swallow thickly and look back to the main tent. There's a breeze shaking its claw, and for the second time in a 5-minute span, I feel like we shouldn't be here. I want to ask Julie to go back and maybe come at another time, but she's already dragging me elsewhere, from attractions to attractions. The more we do, the worse I feel, and there's a dreadful weight settling on my chest. Something's wrong. If I thought this place was magical at first, I'm starting to feel like I read the Bible. But Julie looks like she's having so much fun. And you know, Dustin Fleming is not a coward. The unsettling feeling doesn't leave me at all, and Julie's starting to become irritated with my attitude. I start to tell her that I have a headache and would like to go back home, that we could come back some other day, but she brushes me off and say that anyway there's only one attraction left to visit. And something hateful and vile gnaws at my stomach, and I just don't recognize myself. I try to tell Julie that we really have to go, but she's really dragging me by the arm. and into the tent. And I again hear the sound of those tap dancing little feet on the stage, but I see nothing. It's dark, smells rank and humid, and I could feel moss beneath my feet as I stepped further into the tent. Julie curses me for not telling her about the carnival because she would have brought a lamp if she had known. I laugh nervously and tell her that since we didn't see anything, we should just really start to go. She agrees, and I sigh in relief as loudly as I can. As we turn around to make our way to the door, we hit something hard. The door has been blocked, and the sound of the steps is back, louder than ever. What we hit started moving, circling around us like a predator trapping its prey. I hear a slithering noise, followed again by the sound of those infernal feet tapping on the ground. There's not a light that can illuminate us on what's happening, but the creeping feeling in my stomach leaves me believing that we should definitely have left before coming here. And I get this eerie feeling that we just stepped into a monster's cave. His nest of sorts that keeps him hidden from the sun. Clicking noises fill the room, and a long trill has me standing straight, and Julie's arms find her way around mine. She clutches me tightly and tells me that we need to get out, and I can't agree more. So I turn back around and start kicking out whatever it was that's blocking our way. It feels like a shell, but it doesn't even budge beneath my feet. Might not kicking hard enough? And I could have sworn I was kicking like my life depended on it because it probably was. And I then realized that I'm not hearing the carnival music anymore. Now we haven't heard it since the strongman attraction. The static noise finally stops, and dim lighting starts to illuminate the tent. Our way out is still blocked, and Julie's pulling on my arm, quietly asking me to turn around. But I wish I hadn't. When I did turn around, I found myself facing a semi-standing, enormous centipede, with legs like spiders and the body of a shelled caterpillar. I feel my soul disintegrate instantly, and a wet, sticky sensation flowing down the length of my legs. I dare not to watch as I humiliate myself, but I'm pretty sure Julie hasn't even noticed. Both of us are frozen on the spot as the thing half slither, half crawl towards us. And it stops at an arm's distance from us, and I could see its multiple dark, round eyes staring at us. The reflection of the light on each and every single one of them. I'm speechless. I'm not even sure I'm breathing, and Julie's by my side, looking completely terrified and intrigued all at once. The thing's mandibles are soaked in what looks like saliva, but I know better than to trust an insect like that to have no venom. I could feel and hear Julie's heart beating through her palms as her fingernails buried bloody crescents into my arm. But what happens next happens so fast that I'm not even sure if I dreamt it or if it really happened. The beast fell on Julie, mandibles stretching wide to allow her body to fit into its monstrous mouth. And I heard the disgusting sound of the mandibles piercing the skin of her neck But in a matter of a second, it had half of her body engulfed in its mouth. I stood there, frozen, unable to think coherently before the grotesque and horrifying display I was forced to bear witness to. And when I came to it, the caterpillar was down to her ankles, and I knew I needed to do something. I barely had the time to hear it spit her bones out, and I jumped as high as I could and climbed the shell. I forced my way out of the tent, and I ran and ran and ran until I passed out, my lungs burning with a fire that couldn't be tamed. And I do not even remember if I made it back to the trail or if I ran home. But when I woke up in my bed the next morning, the first thing I remember is screaming Julie's name until my mother came in and held me. We never found Julie. We never found her remains, her clothes, and never found those carnival grounds deep in the woods.